Thank you, Anne. Ian, is there any chance of putting the lights on, please? Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. That's actually quite a good metaphor, isn't it? Country needs the lights putting on as well. Right, gosh, so much to say, and only 60 days left to say it in. Well, I've got a lot to say, and by the looks of the good turnout today for a local colloquial meeting and the animation on your faces, you do too. This in a week, you know, when I've heard about failing hospitals, sadly contributing to killing some of their patients, social services ruining the lives of children, and the state rolling out benefits to terrorists and their families. And in all of this, ladies and gentlemen, not a sight and a sound of a single conviction or even a simple sacking to note accountability. So I think to myself, what is wrong with this world and some of the people that live in it? And most of all, what's wrong with the people that govern it, especially currently in the UK? I mean, I'm new to politics, sure, but since having my eyes and ears wide open, I'm stunned, quite frankly, at the level of injustice and incompetence that permeates our society. I mean, it begs the question, with so many wrongs to be righted, where does one start? Well, I'm going to start actually with something of a warning. That's sad, but maybe timely. We are told again and again that the religion of Islam is one of peace, and that the vast majority of Muslims are peaceful citizens, and that I do truly believe. But there is an argument that it's irrelevant, that is meaningless fluff to make us feel better and meant to somehow diminish the spectre of fanatics rampaging across the globe in the name of radical Islam. The fact is that the fanatics currently, at this moment in history, rule Islam. It is the fanatics who march, who are engaged in any one of 50 shooting wars across the globe. It is they who systematically slaughter Christians and tribal groups through Africa and are slowly but surely taking over the continent of Africa in a radical ISIS wave. It is the fanatics who bomb, murder, behead, honour kill. It is they who teach their young to kill and to become suicide bombers. The hard, quantifiable fact is that the peaceful majority, the silent majority, is cowed and extraneous. You know, the average Japanese citizen before the start of World War II was not a warmongering sadist. Yet Japan murdered and slaughtered its way across Southeast Asia in an orgy of killing, systematically slaughtering thousands of Chinese, a lot of whom were killed with bayonet, shovel and sword. And in more recent times, the genocide in Croatia and Rwanda, which collapsed in demonic butchery. Could it not be said that most of the Rwandans were peace-loving citizens? History, ladies and gentlemen, teaches us very simple but blunt lessons. Yet for all our powers of wisdom, the most basic and unconscious, and today is that peace-loving Muslims could be made irrelevant by their inaction. Now, I don't want to single out one religion or one nation, so I would say peace-loving Germans, Japanese, Chinese, Russians, Rwandans, Serbs, Afghans, Iraqis, Palestinians, Somalis, Nigerians and Algerians all have died because the peaceful majority did not act before it was too late. Now, I know this steps outside party politics, but the fact that I mention it in the way that I mention it demonstrates that UKIP, for whom I represent, will not be silenced, cowed and extraneous, because when there is something to say that's important about standards, freedom and life itself, we will say it like no other. You should, you can, and you must vote for UKIP if you want a Britain to be fair, freedom to be real, and life to be sacrosanct. Now, I have this campaign leaflet. Can I just have a quick show of hands, those that have received one of these through their door? Okay, excellent, excellent. I'm getting a really good postbag of responses, mostly emails and quite a few phone calls as well. And I've just taken 3 or 4 of the questions that I've received this week, as I think that most of you will also be thinking of these same questions. So the first gentleman wrote, not a great point of angst, but it's I hear it time and time again. He says, the infantile behaviour of both sides during PMQT, that's Prime Minister's question time, is deplorable. They are laughingstock. All MPs, he says, should be breathalyzed before taking their seat. He even says it might help if their heavily subsidised bars in Westminster were closed down and turned into cafes. Well, I'm thinking not before I get there. So, okay, I said, maybe not the most popular of answers, this one. I understand your view in re-PMQT, because, in fairness, it's the view of most of the nation, or at least it seems that way. I do think it should be rejigged in some way, yes. But, you know, politics is such a serious business that a little bit of lightheartedness, a little bit of theatre perhaps, is sometimes something of a relief. The next question that was raised this week was one with a lot more angst. And this person said, if we must continue with our current policy leading to the inexorable dilution of British culture, any new immigrants must meet very high standards. They said one of the reasons that the writer relocated to the New Forest from Reading is due to the decline in the ethnic culture of his hometown. How can it be right, Mr. Bailey, he writes, that I feel a stranger in my town when my ancestors have been living there for centuries? I do hope, he pleads, that you and UKIP will represent our views on this matter instead of my being branded a racist. I just want my England back. I said, you mean our England, our UK? Imperfect, yes, but made in Great Britain. I could literally cry, I really could, at what's happening and is likely to happen unless UKIP have a say. And I said that I and UKIP will represent your views, sir. I know, of course, you are not a racist just for simply being a traditional Englishman. Now, another topic that's raised time and time again is that of Nigel Farage. This person writes, Nigel Farage, I see him as a one-man band. Great personality, eloquent, and with his feet firmly planted on the ground. But where? Where's the rest of his party? Where are the policies and the strategies? So I said, Nigel Farage is indeed a very good leader and frontman. The rest of his party are right here and in other constituencies, battling at ground level without the public profile, the funds and the troops on the ground that Labour and Tories have. But what we do have are some excellent policies wrapped in common sense. And my website, which by the way will be live in approximately 10 to 14 days' time, will mention 25 of those policies. And UKIP's manifesto, of course, which I implore you to read, will mention a whole lot more. Finally, yesterday, in fact, somebody wrote to me and said, as a concerned voter, this lady said, I'm looking for a breath of fresh air to break up the tired and complacent status quo in Westminster. Well, I am standing up to be counted. I am the breath of fresh air, madam, that you want. I am new blood, and I am the blood of England. If the New Forest voters will only wake up to this battle for Britain, I promise to make a difference worth voting for, along with my other UKIP colleagues in Westminster. I thanked her for her good wishes and assured her that that would go well, together with lots of hard work between now and the general election. Now I'm going to move on to a couple of more headline, topical, national points of debate. Starting with the monster in the room that is the European Union. What, ladies and gentlemen, do taxpayers pay for? For Westminster to operate as a glorified local council, a Britain which is just a region in a larger country, or a federal Europe? Mr. Barroso, he was the former president of the EU Council, once said, we need to move towards a federation of nation states. This is what we need. This is our political horizon. Now, what I am about to say is more important than I could possibly emphasise in words. So in a moment, I'm going to pause for dramatic effect. But this is not theatre. This is not a game. It is not even the new battle of Britain. It is the battle for Britain. The EU calendar shows that in the second half of 2017, Britain will hold the rotating presidency of the Council of the EU. At that time, the Prime Minister and any one of his cabinet ministers will be on the podium in front of the mics and cameras at all the major European meetings. In the second half of 2017, for 6 months, the PM and senior cabinet ministers will pose as if they are at the centre of all things European, directly influencing and changing events. But that stage will be a game, a bit of theatre. It will just be pantomime, meant to deceive the British people who do not know how the EU works. This pantomime will be played out at exactly the right time to coincide with the promised EU referendum. It is sickening in its cynicism. What's more, if we remain in the EU, we will probably be in it for generations. When that happens, the EU will become dominated by Turkey, which is the most populated country, or will be, in the EU. Turkey is a devout Muslim country. Fair enough. But they will have more members of the European Union Parliament than any other member state, including Germany. As for free movement, just take a look at Turkey's neighbours and the insanely porous border with Syria. If we don't get Britain out, we will be facing open borders with Turkey. And I have to say, to not put too fine a point on it, a simulation will be inevitable. If our European movement is to win the referendum and get Britain out, we must be prepared. We must, as well as protecting our historical legacy campaign with a positive message for the future, we must state that a vision of Britain must be as a global player, vigorous in its defence, free and independent to flourish, not as an inhibited federal state, but as a united kingdom. Now, John, this one's for you. Free movement of EU labour without checks, aka immigration. A combination of inadequate criminal databases in Eastern European countries, their reluctance to share that information, indeed our failure to demand it, means that those with convictions can and do slip through the net. Recently, the Home Office proposed that those from outside the EU would have to open up their criminal convictions, but that this would not apply to those within the EU. That's like sticking a plaster over half a wound, pointless in its prevention and healing process. Recent figures show that 600,000 people, thereabouts, came into our country in the last year of recording the stats. And that does not tell the full story. When you add back the people that have fled, left, then it reduces to 300,000. It is still thereabouts at least 6 times higher than UKIP want. It is even 3 times higher than the Conservatives said that they would control. And as Labour and the Lib Dems have no will, including the Greens and the SNP, to set any targets, then the potential for implosion is right there. This leads me on to mentioning the heralded government aim to build 200,000 new starter homes by 2020. Admirable, you might think. But at the current rate, by 2020, we will have circa 4.8 million new additional people in the country, all of whom will be, by definition, first-time buyers. So, let's look at that. Build 200,000 new homes for first-time buyers. 4.8 million people coming into the country. First-time buyers. Now, I know I only got a grade C in mathematics O-levels, but even I know that that is a catastrophic misunderstanding by the government of the problem, or should I say, meltdown that lies ahead. They appear, I can't quite believe this, but they appear to be arguing that instead of policies to reduce immigration, the objective should be to mitigate its impact. The clear implication, of course, is that since nothing can be done about immigration whilst we're in the EU, then we should just, might as well, get used to it. Do we really want to vote to allow that to happen? Let me conclude on this subject by stating that UKIP and much of the general public, I'm sure, are perfectly happy with controlled immigration at a sensible level. We recognise the benefits in an open and economic society, but the problem is one of scale. I repeat, the problem is one of scale. If this is allowed to continue at the present rate, within the next 5 years, we will have had to have built 3 cities the size of Birmingham. 3 cities the size of Birmingham in the next 5 years. Forgive me for saying so, but you have to be living in a world of your own. Some call that cloud cuckoo land. Or breathtakingly ignorant to allow that to happen under our watch. Now, I'm sorry for being the purveyor of doom and gloom. And so far I haven't done much to brighten up your afternoon, perhaps. But I'm going to try and raise a smile with a couple of light-hearted interventions at this point. So I heard of a man called Sheriff Joe Arpaio. Works out of Arizona. And he created a tent city jail. He stopped smoking and porno magazines in that jail. He took away the inmates' weights and started chain gangs so that the inmates could do free work on county and city projects. And then he started chain gangs for women so that he wouldn't be sued for discrimination. He took away cable TV until he found out some quango requirement that required cable TV in prisons. So he reinstalled it, but only allowed the Disney and Weather channels in. And when he was asked why the Weather Channel, he said, "So they will know how it's going to be when they're working on my chain gangs." He cut off coffee since it had no nutritional value. And when the inmates complained, he told them, "Gee, man, this isn't the Ritz or the Carlton. If you don't like it, Bob, don't come back." Fair enough. And for my second light-hearted intervention, Anne was alluding to it earlier, actually. We've seen some amazing bias and pathetic attempts by the TV media to knock UKIP, the programme about, the fictional programme about 100 days of the UKIP government following an election, and more recently the programme about Meet the UKIPers. However, despite that, imagine how good we would look if aired following a BBC programme called Meet the Labour Party, 6 months in the life of Labour councillors in Rotherham. Standing down Labour MP Austin Mitchell said that if a paedophile stood for Labour in Grimsby, he would probably get elected. Now, that does not apply everywhere, but it does apply perhaps a little too often. And I've heard it said, maybe somewhat harshly, but nevertheless it illustrates the point. You could even pin a blue rosette on a donkey and it would get elected. And maybe even make it to being Prime Minister. Okay, Fran, this one's for you. Animal welfare. I really, really, really have strong views about this. It is time to phase out completely production that uses cages and crates as they thwart the basic instinct of many animals to roam, forage and explore. I know that farming provides valuable income to many rural communities. There should be a particular focus on higher welfare production that delivers a better quality of food and a higher income to those farmers at the farm gate, benefiting both the farmer and the wider community. Furthermore, if I am elected, there's a little something called Private Members Bill, which is something an MP can raise and try and get into law. I would use that in an attempt to ban the inhumane slaughter of over 2.4 million cows, sheep, chicken, rabbits, goats in our country who have their throats cut while still alive and without being stunned. All in the name of halal meat, and allowed by our puny, feeble-minded government under the banner, or should I say the veil, of religious freedom. I want that barbaric practice banned. I am sure most of the country are with me on that, at least the indigenous population. And guess what? If you come here from overseas, or only a 1 or 2 time generation Brit, and you don't like that, then I say go back from whence you came. There are plenty of other dining tables in the world that you can eat at. For my penultimate point, did you know that the government has earmarked £275 million to bribe, pay authorities that promise to freeze or cut their council tax charges in the next financial year? Now, the government have offered £275 million to councils if they will promise to freeze or cut their council tax charges in the next financial year. Just 8 local authorities are reported as planning to lower their council tax charges. Now, what's startling about that is that government's own analysis shows that councils are sitting on £30 billion in reserves and uncollected income, which means it is both possible to maintain frontline services and bring council tax charges down. Did you know council reserves were 21, this is collectively of course, 21.4 billion at the end of 2014, up from 14.3 billion in 2011. Now I ask you, up by 50% in 3 of the hardest years of this recessionary period. Whilst we're facing austerity cuts and we're spending, the council are saving. We never hear it. Over the same period, councils failed to collect 2.5 billion of council tax arrears, lost 2.1 billion in fraud, and were found to have assets of 2.5 billion labelled as surplus to requirements. Well, the rainy day's here, ladies and gentlemen. Let's use some of those reserves and let's get our public services, the NHS and the police force back at the levels that they need to be. Even Community Secretary Eric Pickles said, and I quote him, "Reserves have rocketed up in the past few years and councils could be making better use of their assets to keep issues down, tax issues down, and protect frontline services." I mean, it's not rocket science, is it? Even Eric Pickles gets it. Finally, let me talk to you about the NHS. I said at the beginning that UKIP would not be cowed and extraneous from difficult subjects. And of course, this is one of the most difficult. It is the Holy Grail that is the NHS. UKIP proposes a wonderfully crafted solution to the problem of A&E departments in the name of common sense. We will initiate a pilot programme in English hospitals to put at least one GP on duty in every A&E department during the week. More than that, we will provide additional weekend GP cover to ease the burden on A&E staff who need more time to treat serious illness. If this pilot succeeds in its aim, and it has a very good chance of doing so, then we will roll the programme out across the country. But if not successful, we will learn from it. And having only piloted the idea, we will go back determined to find a better solution. That is how successful business works. I know that, being a successful businessman. And there is every reason to apply that kind of acumen to political and public problems. UKIP will keep the NHS free at the point of delivery. UKIP will invest £3 billion each year and direct it to frontline services. That is more than any other party has committed to at this stage. Dementia funding will be £130 million per year, double the Tories' pledge, and critically, as common sense dictates, in line with what Alzheimer's research say they need. A licence to manage, to stop the cover-up of poor performance. In other words, unsuitable hospital managers will have their licences revoked and cannot be simply moved or found another job in the health service. We will put another £1 billion per year into elderly social care. Hospital parking charges will be scrapped. There will be no tuition fees for medical students, providing they pay taxes and live here for at least 5 years. We will reintroduce the role of matrons, train nurses on wards rather than in classrooms, and we will reinstate the state-enrolled nurse to encourage more homegrown medical talent. Ours is a vision of the NHS that works. Where incompetence is found, it is thrown out. Where supply is always greater than demand, and when lives are at risk, there is a no-compromise policy to do the right thing. Please join us. It is a quest. No, it is a crusade. It is our time, our lives, and our country.